I never thought a single piece of mail could destroy my entire future, but that's exactly what happened on a random Tuesday afternoon in May. The letter wasn't even addressed to me. It was for my father, marked confidential in bold red letters. I probably wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't been the one collecting the mail that day. My name is Callan, and until that moment, I was just another high school senior counting down the days until graduation. I had my whole life mapped out. Georgetown University in the fall, following in my mom's footsteps. She'd passed away when I was 12, but she'd left behind a college fund that was supposed to make sure I could chase those dreams. The envelope tore slightly as I pulled it from the stack, revealing the Georgetown University letterhead inside. My heart stopped. I'd already received my acceptance letter months ago, so this had to be something else. The rational part of my brain said to just add it to Dad's pile. But my trembling fingers had already slipped inside the tear before I could stop myself. Your request to withdraw the entirety of the Monroe Family Trust Fund has been processed. The words blurred as I read them again and again. The amount listed, nearly $200,000, made me feel sick to my stomach. That was my college fund, the money Mom had set aside for me. And someone had emptied it. I heard the click of heels on hardwood behind me. Callan, darling, is that today's mail? My stepmother Lydia's saccharine voice made my skin crawl. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, but not before catching the signature at the bottom, hers. Just bills, I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the roaring in my ears. Nothing important. She held out her perfectly manicured hand. I'll take those. Your father likes me to handle all the financial matters. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I handed over the stack, keeping my face neutral even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Is Dad home yet? He's working late again. But Tamsin and I are going shopping for her junior prom dress. You're welcome to join us. She knew I wouldn't. I never did. Thanks, but I've got homework. I headed for the stairs, taking them two at a time until I reached my room. Only then did I let myself break down, sliding down against my closed door as the reality hit me. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Avery. Still on for study group tonight? I stared at the message, my vision blurring with tears. How could I tell her that my dreams of us being roommates at Georgetown were suddenly going up in smoke? The sound of Lydia's Mercedes starting up in the driveway snapped me back to reality. Through my window, I watched her and my half-sister Tamsin pull away, probably off to spend more of my future on whatever designer dress caught their eye. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my grandmother, Mom's mom, coming to Sunday dinner this weekend, sweetheart. I looked around my room, at the Georgetown pennant hanging above my desk, at the photo of Mom and me at her alma mater when I was 10. She was beaming with pride, telling me how one day I'd walk the same halls she did. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Whatever game Lydia was playing, she'd picked the wrong person to steal from. Mom had always taught me to stand up for myself, and it was time I honored that lesson. I texted Avery back, "Can I crash at your place tonight? We need to talk." Then I started packing a bag. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't spending another night under the same roof as the woman who'd just stolen my future. Avery's guest room felt like a sanctuary compared to the battlefield I'd left behind. I'd been here for 3 days, and my phone was filled with missed calls from Dad, probably Lydia's doing, since he'd barely noticed me when I was actually home. Your dad left another voicemail, Avery said, tossing my phone onto the bed beside me. Maybe you should at least text him back? I was about to respond when my phone lit up with a notification. Tamsin had just posted a new Instagram story. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There she was, posing in what looked like a designer boutique, surrounded by shopping bags. The caption read, "Retail therapy with Mom. Georgetown shopping spree. #blessed." My hands shook as I showed Avery the screen. That's my money she's spending. My future. You need to talk to your dad, Avery insisted, sitting next to me. He can't possibly know what Lydia did. But I knew better. Dad had changed since marrying Lydia 3 years ago. The man who used to take me camping and taught me how to change a tire had disappeared, replaced by someone who seemed to exist solely to please his new wife and stepdaughter. I'll do better than that, I said, grabbing my keys. I'm going over there right now, while Lydia's out spending my college fund. The drive home felt surreal. When I pulled into the driveway, Dad's car was there, a rare sight these days. Through the window, I could see him in his home office, probably buried in work as usual. I didn't bother knocking. "Dad, we need to talk." He looked up, surprised. "Callan? Where have you been?" "Lydia's been worried sick." "Lydia's been worried?" I pulled out the crumpled Georgetown letter from my pocket. "Is that why she emptied my college fund?" His expression shifted from confusion to something harder to read. "That money was part of the family trust. Lydia and I decided. Mom left that money for me." My voice cracked. "For Georgetown. It was her dream for me. Your mother's been gone for 6 years, Callan." He rubbed his temples. "Things change. Families change. Tamsin needs designer clothes and shopping sprees?" I cut him off. "While I lose my shot at college? Don't be dramatic. You can go to community college. Get a job. It'll build character." The casual dismissal in his voice felt like a physical blow. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Lydia's laugh echoed through the house, followed by Tamsin's excited chatter about their shopping trip. "Oh, Callan's here." Tamsin appeared in the doorway, wearing a new outfit that probably cost more than a semester's worth of textbooks. "Dad, look what Mom bought me." Lydia appeared behind her, placing a protective hand on Tamsin's shoulder. "Graham, darling, we found the most perfect things for Tamsin's senior year. She'll be the best-dressed student at Georgetown." The room went silent. I stared at Tamsin, then at my father, understanding dawning like ice water in my veins. "That's what this is about. You're sending her to Georgetown with my money." "Now, Callan," Lydia started, her voice honey-sweet, "you know Tamsin's always dreamed of Georgetown. And with her grades, well, she needs every advantage we can give her." I looked at my father, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything. But he just sat there, avoiding my eyes. "Mom always said you were the strongest person she knew," I said quietly. "I wonder what she'd think of you now." I walked out, ignoring Lydia's calls and Tamsin's smirk. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed my grandmother's number. If anyone would understand, it would be Mom's mother. "Grandma, can I come over? There's something I need to tell you about Mom's college fund." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of my father watching from the window. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing but pity for him. He might have forgotten who he used to be, but I wasn't about to let anyone make me forget who I was or who I could become. Grandma Mabel's house always smelled like vanilla and old books. Today, though, the familiar comfort couldn't calm the storm inside me as I sat at her kitchen table, watching her dig through a filing cabinet she'd dragged from her study. "I knew I kept these somewhere," she muttered, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "Your mother wasn't the only one who knew how to keep receipts." She spread several documents across the table. My eyes caught familiar names: Lydia Parker, Lydia Henderson, Lydia Walsh, all my stepmother under different last names. "3 marriages before your father," Grandma said, tapping each document. Each ending the same way, with cleaned-out bank accounts and broken families. My stomach lurched. Dad never knew. Men in love see what they want to see. She pulled out a newspaper clipping. "This one's from 2015. Her second husband's family business went bankrupt mysteriously right after their divorce." The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the window, I spotted Lydia's Mercedes in the driveway. My hands started shaking. "I've got this," Grandma said, straightening her spine as she walked to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, but I could hear everything. "Mabel, darling." Lydia's fake warmth could have melted steel. "I thought I might find Callan here. We're all so worried." "Are you now?" Grandma's voice had turned to ice. "Worried about Callan, or worried about what she might tell me?" "I don't know what she's been saying, but there's clearly been a misunderstanding about the trust fund. Like the misunderstanding with the Hendersons' family business?" Grandma cut in. "Or the Walsh estate?" The silence that followed was deafening. "I don't know what you think you know," Lydia finally said, her sugary tone gone, "but Graham trusts me completely. And Callan's just going to have to accept that things change. Family dynamics evolve." "They certainly do," Grandma replied. "Speaking of evolution, I just had the most interesting chat with my estate lawyer this morning. Would you like to know what we discussed?" Another loaded silence. I crept closer to the doorway. Mabel, Lydia's voice had dropped to a whisper. Let's be reasonable. Whatever Callan's told you. Get off my property, Grandma said quietly. And know this, if anything happens to Callan's future, if one more penny of her mother's money goes to your daughter's shopping sprees, every document I have goes straight to my lawyer. And the IRS. And the police. The door closed with a decisive click. Through the window, I watched Lydia's Mercedes peel out of the driveway, gravel spraying behind her tires. Well, Grandma said, returning to the kitchen. That was invigorating. She pulled out her checkbook. Now, about your education. Grandma, no. Callan Monroe, your mother would haunt me for eternity if I let that woman steal your future. She started writing. Community college first semester, then we'll see about transferring to Georgetown next year. And I know the perfect place for you to work part-time. She told me about her friend Richard Bennett, who owned an upscale restaurant called the Silver Spoon. He owes me a favor. Several, actually. And he pays well. But what about Lydia? What if she tries something else? Grandma's eyes sparkled. Oh, I'm counting on it. You see, your mother wasn't just my daughter. She was my lawyer. And she taught me everything about keeping records. She patted the manila envelope. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead. I looked at the check she'd written, then at the documents scattered across the table. For the first time since finding that Georgetown letter, I felt something other than despair. Something that felt a lot like hope. There's just one condition, Grandma added, her expression serious. You have to promise me you won't let this break you. Use it to make yourself stronger. Your mother would want that. I nodded, thinking of Mom, of Georgetown, of all the dreams that suddenly seemed possible again. I promise. Good. Grandma smiled. Now, let's call Richard. I believe the Silver Spoon is hiring servers, and you, my dear, are about to learn the fine art of serving karma one plate at a time. 3 weeks into my new life, and my feet were killing me. The Silver Spoon's marble floors looked elegant but felt like concrete after an 8-hour shift. Still, every time I counted my tips, I thought about Tamsin's Georgetown shopping sprees and somehow found the energy to keep going. Order up for table 12. Mr. Bennett called from the kitchen. I grabbed the plates, balancing them expertly now. 3 weeks had taught me more than just serving. It had shown me how to stand tall even when everything felt heavy. Callan. A familiar voice stopped me cold. My father sat at table 12 alone, looking smaller somehow in his business suit. I didn't know you worked here. I set his order down carefully, professional smile firmly in place. Will there be anything else, sir? He flinched at the formality. Please sit down for a minute. We need to talk. I'm working. I gestured at the busy restaurant. She's due for her break anyway, Mr. Bennett said behind me, making me jump. He gave me a knowing look. Take 15, Callan. I slid into the seat across from Dad, keeping my back straight like Mr. Bennett had taught us. Power posture, he called it. Never let them see you slouch. You look different, Dad said, studying me. Amazing what paying your own bills does for personal growth. The words came out sharper than I intended. He pushed an envelope across the table. Lydia's been going through some old papers. She found something you should see. Inside was a letter from Mom, dated a week before she died. My hands trembled as I read it. She wanted to split the trust fund, Dad said quietly. Half for you, half for any future siblings. She wanted to make sure everyone was treated fairly. I looked up from the letter, fury rising in my throat. So that makes it okay? Using my half for Tamsin's shopping sprees. That's not... He stopped, rubbing his face. Things got complicated. Lydia said. Mr. Monroe? A new voice interrupted. Mr. Bennett stood there, looking between us. I couldn't help but overhear. Perhaps you'd like to know that Callan's already been accepted into our management training program. Youngest candidate ever. Dad blinked, surprised. Management? But you've only been here 3 weeks, Mr. Bennett finished. Sometimes that's all it takes to spot real potential. Unlike some, I believe in investing in promising futures. The pointed comment hung in the air. Dad's face reddened. Your break's over, Callan, Mr. Bennett said gently. Table 15 needs their check. I stood, still clutching Mom's letter. You can tell Lydia her latest manipulation failed. Mom might have wanted to split the money, but she trusted you to do right by me. That's on your conscience, not hers. Later that night, closing up with Mr. Bennett, I finally asked the question that had been nagging me. There isn't really a management training program, is there? He smiled, handing me a folder. There is now. Your grandmother isn't the only one who knows how to play chess, kid. Sometimes the best defense is a strong offense. I opened the folder to find actual management training materials and a significant pay raise offer. My vision blurred. Why? I whispered. Because 20 years ago, someone gave me a second chance when my family turned their backs on me. He locked the restaurant doors. Besides, I've seen how you handle difficult customers. Anyone who can serve soup to the woman who stole their future without spilling it has management potential. I thought about Dad's face when Mr. Bennett mentioned the management program, about Lydia's attempt to use Mom's letter to manipulate me again. Something shifted inside me, the weight of their betrayal transforming into something stronger. When do I start? I asked. Mr. Bennett grinned. You already have. And trust me, this is going to be much more satisfying than any revenge you could plan. Success is the best revenge, especially when served at a 5-star restaurant. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself really smile. Maybe Mom's letter wasn't meant to justify their actions. Maybe it was her way of teaching me one final lesson about family. Sometimes you have to build your own. My phone buzzed during the morning rush at the Silver Spoon. Another Instagram notification from Tamsin. Usually, I ignored them, but this one made my blood freeze. A photo of her wearing Mom's old Georgetown sweater, altered and cropped into some trendy fashion statement. The caption read, "Vintage upgrade. Thanks for the hand-me-down, sis. Hashtag Georgetown bound, hashtag better worn by me." The coffee pot I was holding slipped, shattering against the marble floor. Several customers jumped. "Take 5, Mr. Bennett said quietly, appearing beside me with a broom. "Get some air." In the back alley, I called Grandma Mabel, my hands shaking. She's wearing Mom's sweater. The one I've been looking for since. "I know, sweetheart. I saw it." Grandma's voice was tight with controlled anger. "There's something else you need to know. I just got off the phone with my lawyer. Lydia's been asking questions about my estate." "What?" "Apparently, she's concerned about your father's inheritance rights." Grandma's laugh was bitter. "She's not even trying to hide her intentions anymore." A text from Avery popped up. "Have you seen what Tamsin posted? There's more." I switched to Tamsin's Instagram story. There she was in Mom's old room, my old room. Everything transformed. The Georgetown pennant was gone, replaced by designer posters. Mom's old desk, where she used to help me with homework, had been painted pink. "They're renovating," I whispered into the phone. "They're erasing everything." "Come over tonight," Grandma said. "There's something in the attic you should see." The rest of my shift passed in a blur. As I was leaving, Mr. Bennett handed me an envelope. "Your first management bonus," he said. "You've earned it." At Grandma's house, she led me straight to the attic. "Your mother was always smarter than people gave her credit for," she said, pulling out an old filing cabinet. She kept records of everything. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, investment accounts, property deeds, and a separate trust fund I hadn't known existed. "She set this up the week before she died," Grandma explained. "It's completely separate from the family trust. Lydia can't touch it." My hands trembled as I read the amounts. It wasn't Georgetown money, but it was something. Something Lydia couldn't steal. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you needed to find your own strength first." Grandma sat beside me. "Look at what you've accomplished already. The restaurant, community college, standing on your own 2 feet. That's all you." My phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification. This time it was a video. Tamsin, wearing more of Mom's old clothes, doing some kind of fashion show in my old room. Out with the old, in with the new. Sorry, not sorry, sis. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, grabbing my keys. "Callan, wait." "No," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "I'm done waiting. Done watching them destroy everything she left behind." "What are you going to do?" I thought about Mr. Bennett's bonus in my pocket, about Mom's secret trust fund, about all the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. "I'm going to stop trying to save what's already gone," I said, "and start building something new. Something they can't touch." I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. For the first time in months, I started typing, "Dear Tamsin, enjoy the hand-me-downs. I've got something better, a future I built myself. Hashtag silver lining." Then I attached a photo of myself in my new manager's blazer, standing in front of the silver spoon. "You know she'll be furious," Grandma said, but she was smiling. "Good," I replied, hitting post. Let her see what real inheritance looks like. Mom didn't leave me things. She left me her strength. And I'm finally ready to use it. As we left the attic, I felt lighter somehow. Let them have the sweaters, the room, the house. I had something better, a plan, a future, and most importantly, the truth about who I really was, my mother's daughter, through and through. The reservation book at the Silver Spoon showed Monroe party, 30 guests for Saturday night. I stared at Tamsin's looping signature, remembering her Instagram announcement, Sweet 16 Part 2, because one party isn't enough. Hashtag Silver Spoon Soiree. "We can reassign you that night," Mr. Bennett offered, watching my face. No. I straightened my manager's blazer. "This is my restaurant too now." The night arrived with a flash of camera phones and designer dresses. Tamsin swept in like she owned the place, Lydia close behind. Dad trailed after them, looking uncomfortable in his suit. "Oh my God," Tamsin's voice carried across the dining room. "They actually made her a manager? How desperate are they?" I kept my professional smile fixed, approaching their table. "Welcome to the Silver Spoon. I'll be overseeing your service tonight." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "We specifically requested Marcus as our server. Marcus is off tonight. I'll be handling everything personally." "Graham," Lydia turned to my father, "surely you don't want Callan embarrassing herself like this?" Before he could respond, Tamsin's friends started arriving. The volume in the restaurant doubled as 16-year-olds informal wear filled the private dining room. Everything was going smoothly until I overheard Tamsin in the bathroom during my routine check of the facilities. "Just wait," she was saying to her friends. "Mom arranged everything. By the time tonight's over, little Miss Manager won't know what hit her." I slipped out before they saw me, my mind racing. What were they planning? The answer came during the main course. A health inspector arrived, unscheduled, unusual for a Saturday night. He headed straight for the kitchen, Lydia's smirk following him. "Surprise inspection," he announced, pulling out forms. "We received an anonymous complaint." Mr. Bennett emerged from his office, but I stepped forward first. "Of course. I have all our documentation ready." Lydia's face fell as I pulled out our perfectly maintained records. 2 months of management training hadn't been for nothing. But they had a backup plan. "Is that a roach?" Tamsin suddenly shrieked, pointing at her plate. Her performance was perfect, just dramatic enough to draw everyone's attention. The inspector turned sharply. I saw Lydia's hand move, saw something dark drop onto the plate. "That's impossible," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "But let's check the security cameras, shall we?" Mr. Bennett was already moving to the surveillance monitor behind the host stand. "Interesting timing," he said, rewinding the footage. "Especially since we just had our monthly pest inspection yesterday." The color drained from Lydia's face. "Should we show everyone what really happened?" I asked quietly. "Or would you prefer to enjoy the rest of your dinner somewhere else?" "You wouldn't dare throw us out," Lydia hissed. "Do you know who we are in this town? Do you know who I am?" I countered. "Because I'm not the same person you could push around before. This is my house now." "Graham," Lydia appealed to my father. "Are you going to let her speak to us this way?" Dad looked between us, then at the security footage still playing. For the first time, I saw something shift in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or regret. "Actually," he said slowly, "I think it's time we left." Tamsin's mouth fell open. "Dad!" "Now, Tamsin." As they gathered their things, Lydia grabbed my arm. "This isn't over. You have no idea what's coming." "No," I agreed, gently removing her hand. "You have no idea what's coming. Grandma says hi, by the way. She mentioned you've been asking about her will." The threat in Lydia's eyes turned to fear for just a moment. She knew she'd underestimated me. After they left, Mr. Bennett found me in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "You okay, kid?" "They'll try something else," I said. "Something bigger." "Probably." He nodded. "But now they know you're ready for them. Sometimes that's enough to change the game entirely." I thought about Dad's face when he finally saw Lydia for who she was, about Tamsin's shock when her plan failed, about all the nights I'd spent thinking I'd lost everything. The game's already changed, I said, picking up a stack of menus. They just don't know it yet. The lawyer's office felt too small for all the tension it contained. Grandma Mabel sat beside me, calm as ever, while Lydia paced like a caged animal. Dad slumped in his chair, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Tamsin was notably absent, probably still furious about being banned from the Silver Spoon. Let's begin. Mr. Patterson, Grandma's lawyer, pulled out a thick folder. Mrs. Sinclair has requested this meeting to discuss some changes to her estate planning. Lydia stopped pacing. Changes? Yes. Grandma's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. I thought it was time everyone understood exactly where they stand. Mr. Patterson began reading. With each sentence, I watched Lydia's perfectly composed facade crack. The house in Martha's Vineyard, the investment portfolio, the family antiques, everything was going to me, with specific provisions preventing any transfer to the Monroe Family Trust. This is ridiculous, Lydia snapped. Graham is Mabel's son-in-law. He has rights. Actually, Mr. Patterson interrupted, he doesn't. Not since he allowed his new wife to empty his daughter's college fund, the one his first wife specifically set up. Dad's head snapped up. How did you? Caroline was my daughter and my lawyer. Grandma cut in. Did you really think she wouldn't leave a paper trail? You can't prove anything, Lydia's voice shook slightly. That money was part of the family trust. Like the money from the Hendersons' trust? I asked quietly. Or the Walshes? The color drained from Lydia's face. What are you talking about? Your previous marriages, Grandma said. The ones that ended with mysteriously empty bank accounts. Caroline kept those records too. She was investigating you, Lydia. Right up until she died. Dad stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. What? Sit down, Graham, Lydia commanded, but her voice had lost its usual authority. No. He turned to face her. What is she talking about? What previous marriages? 3 of them, I said, sliding the documents across the table. Each ending the same way, with empty accounts and broken families. It's all lies. Lydia's voice rose. Graham, they're trying to turn you against me, just like Callan has been doing. By telling the truth? I stood up, facing her directly. You want to talk about lies? Let's talk about how you convinced Dad to empty Mom's college fund for Tamsin. Or how you've been asking around town about Grandma's will, planning your next big score. I did everything for this family. Lydia shouted. While you were playing victim, I was securing Tamsin's future. With my future, I finished. With Mom's money, did you think nobody would notice? Or did you just not care? Graham, Lydia turned to my father, reaching for him. You know me. You know I only wanted what was best. But Dad was still staring at the documents, at the evidence of her past marriages, at the trail of destruction she'd left behind. I don't know you at all, he whispered. Mr. Patterson, Grandma's voice cut through the tension. I believe we're finished here. Please make sure the police get their copies of everything. The police. Lydia's composure shattered completely. Fraud is still a crime. Grandma stood, gathering her purse. Even when you dress it up as family planning. As we left the office, Dad caught my arm. Cal and I didn't know about any of it. I should have. You should have protected me, I finished, gently removing his hand. But you didn't. And now you don't have to. I learned to protect myself. Outside, the summer air felt clean and fresh. Grandma linked her arm through mine as we walked to her car. You okay? She asked. I thought about Mom's investigation, about how she'd been trying to protect our family even then, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. Yeah, I said, watching Lydia's world crumble through the office window. I think I finally am. Behind us, I could hear Dad calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Sometimes you have to build something entirely new instead. 6 months later, I stood in the Silver Spoon's kitchen, reviewing the night's reservations. The restaurant had become more than just a job. It was my sanctuary, my proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Special delivery. Mr. Bennett called, carrying in a large envelope. Georgetown University. My hands trembled as I opened it. The transfer acceptance letter felt surreal: community college credits, work experience, and a glowing recommendation from Mr. Bennett had done what my stolen trust fund couldn't. "Congratulations, kid," he smiled. "Though I hate losing my best manager." About that, I pulled out my proposal. What if you didn't have to? The plans for a second Silver Spoon location in Georgetown had been my secret project for months. Mr. Bennett studied the business plan, his expression unreadable. The front bell chimed. "We're not open yet," I called, heading to the dining room. Then stopped short. Dad stood there, looking older and somehow smaller. The divorce proceedings had been quick after Lydia's arrest for fraud. Tamsin had gone to live with her aunt in California. "I saw your Instagram post," he said quietly. "About Georgetown." I nodded, maintaining my distance. "I found my own way there." "I know." He placed something on the nearest table, Mom's old Georgetown sweater, carefully folded. "I found this in Tamsin's donation pile. Thought you might want it back." The sight of it hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed it anymore, but because I realized how far I'd come from the girl who'd thought losing it meant losing everything. "Keep it," I said. "Or donate it. I'm getting my own." He nodded, understanding flickering across his face. "Callan, I know I can't fix what happened." "You're right," I cut him off. "You can't. But that's not why you're here, is it?" He pulled out a check. "It's what's left of the trust fund, after Lydia's assets were seized. I've been trying to make it right. I don't need it anymore." I gestured around the restaurant. "I built something of my own." "I know," he said again, his voice rough. "You're so much like your mother. She would be proud." "She already was," I replied. "Even before all this." That's something Lydia never understood. Real love doesn't need to be earned. Mr. Bennett appeared in the kitchen doorway, my proposal in hand. "We should discuss these expansion plans, Callan. If you're serious about managing both locations." Dad's eyes widened slightly, and I saw him finally understanding what he'd missed, his daughter growing into someone stronger than he'd imagined. "I should go," he said, leaving the check and sweater on the table. "But Callan, I'm proud of you too, for whatever that's worth now." After he left, I picked up Mom's sweater. It still smelled faintly of home, but it didn't hurt to hold it anymore. Some things you outgrow. Others you rebuild into something new. "So," Mr. Bennett said, "about these expansion plans." "Actually," I smiled, "I have a better idea." I laid out my revised proposal. Not just a second location, but a training program for other kids like me, who needed a chance to build their own futures. "Your mother wanted to give you Georgetown," Grandma had told me once. "But what she really gave you was the strength to get there on your own." Looking around the Silver Spoon, my home, my victory, my future, I finally understood what she meant. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't what's left to you, but what you build for yourself. I hung Mom's sweater in my office, next to my Georgetown acceptance letter and manager certificate, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as proof of how far I'd come. Some people might call it revenge, this rising from the ashes of what Lydia tried to destroy, but I preferred to think of it as restoration, not of what was taken, but of who I was always meant to become.